Well, we've been going through this series, Joy Robbers. And just to recap, we started with unforgiveness. Shane talked about unforgiveness. And then he talked about, last week, he talked about holding on to the past. And he said, just let it go. He said it over and over again. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. And honestly, I could just leave that up there. That could be my whole sermon. He's not here this morning. You hear that? I have that on a constant loop in my office, in case there's any sort of division between us. So, let it go. I know. The thing is that I can get away with that because he doesn't know how to make animated GIFs like I do. So I'm safe. I know I'm good. Well, this morning I'm gonna talk about another one of the joy robbers. Another one of the joy robbers that steals our joy. And if you've got notes, you can follow along. They're just pretty basic notes, but I've got the notes here. And this morning we're going to talk about jealousy. And I want to read from Shakespeare where he says, "Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock." This is from Othello, the play about Othello. I don't know. I shouldn't have even gone any further than that. But this talks about this green-eyed monster, jealousy. And I want to start this talk about jealousy about reminding you that no matter who you are, there is always someone who is bigger or better or stronger than you. Up here we have a picture of The Rock and Mark Wahlberg. Both of those guys, you can look at them and see, these are pretty strong guys. I'm somewhere in between Mark Wahlberg and The Rock. But then you put Mark Wahlberg and The Rock between Shaq and Charles Barkley, and he looks like a toddler, like he's so small. You have to remember that there is always someone bigger and stronger and better than you, no matter what you are bigger and stronger and better at. And one of these reminders of what's bigger and better and stronger than us is social media. And now, I enjoy social media. I wouldn't say I'm a social media guru like Sam, our beloved youth pastor, who knew how to do everything. Although if you do follow the Dalhousie Church Twitter account, you will find that there's tweets throughout my sermon. I set that up, so I'm getting there. But Instagram and Facebook are what Seth Godin describes as envy amplifiers. Kind of like an electric guitar, you get an electric guitar and you amplify it and you kick it up to 11. That's what social media can become. It can be this amplifier that just takes our envy and cranks it all the way up. You know, we see our friends who have cuter kids. Maybe they have bigger houses and better stuff. Sorry, guys. My kids are sitting in the front row here. They have these bigger things. I have a friend, and right now they're on vacation in Victoria. And he's a fellow pastor as well. And I see his pictures, and I'm like, they're like having the most amazing vacation ever. And I get to go on vacation with my family in a week here. And I was kind of looking at my dinky little vacation, like going to the lake. Like, is this any good? Like, I wish I could go to the island and see hermit crabs. But we see our friends and our acquaintances, and we want what they have. It's this filter. We filter reality through this lens where everything is perfect. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, all of these things are not bad on their own. But when we try to compare our real lives against these online lives, it becomes an unhealthy source of jealousy and envy. You know, every single one of us encounters jealousy on a daily basis. Is that true? Raise your hand if you've ever been jealous of someone or something. Tyson, raise your hand. He was holding back. We've hung out enough that I know. You're jealous of ugly dog. It's okay. It's all around us, in our face, every day. And the question is, how do we confront jealousy? Because it's stealing our joy. As a church, it's stealing our joy. You know, I'll share a personal story of myself. I've experienced the ugliness of jealousy many times in my life, but just recently, Melora and I had the privilege, that's what we do in our house when we're saying, the privilege of coaching. I had the privilege of coaching Jude's soccer team, the Golden Eagles. Now, there should be in your minds, Tom Mulhern coaching a soccer team. You make the obvious assumptions. We played 8 games over the span of 8 weeks, and we lost every single game. Thank you. We had a defeated season. It's kind of the opposite of undefeated. You know how you say, well, it's an undefeated season. We had a defeated season. I remember watching the players on the other teams, these kids that we were doing U6 soccer, so these 5-year-olds, these players on these other teams just thinking, man, look at those guys. Look at them score. There was one little girl. She was like this cute little blonde-haired little thing, and she'd come up and she'd, boom, book it in, and she'd come out and go, yes! And after the first score, she'd go, 2. Every time she came out of the net, 17. She would count each of the scores. And I remember just thinking, now, it could have been due to coaching, or lack thereof. It could have been due to our players. We had an awesome team of players. But I remember I was embarrassed sometimes after the game, getting into the van thinking, man, we didn't even score. And these other teams have little mini David Beckhams and Christine Sinclairs. I had to Google that second name. Christine Sinclairs on their team. Our team had a lot of fun, but I was jealous of the other teams. We've all had these experiences of jealousy and envy. Now, when I was looking for the difference between jealousy and envy, because Shane said, okay, Tom, you got to preach on jealousy, envy came up a lot. And I thought, okay, what's the difference between jealousy and envy? And I couldn't find a good definition. I looked in my Bible dictionaries. I looked in my Bible. I Googled it. I looked on my, Apple dictionary. And they were all kind of different, kind of confusing. So I found this scholar online who actually defines it in a way that I think I can really relate with. So this is a scholar named Homer.
Dad, you shouldn't be jealous of our poo. Remember, it's all about the music.
I'm not jealous. I'm envious. Jealousy is when you're worried someone will take what you have. Envy is wanting what someone else has. What I feel is envy.
Oh. Wow, he's right.
All right. So that's The Simpsons. You can take whatever view, but he's got a great definition. I know, Lisa's like, wow, he's right. So we have jealousy. Jealousy is when you're worried that someone else will take what you have. That involves watchfulness and alertness and this sense of loss. It's the fear that you will lose something that you already have. Jealousy is a 3-part emotion. It involves person A, who I use the emoji, the mad guy. Person A is worried about losing person B or thing B because of person C. So jealousy is when you're worried that someone will take what you have. When you have this emotion, this strong emotion that maybe, an example of this could be that you think your job is in jeopardy because someone else is doing so well at their own job. So you see this person and you become jealous of them because you think, well, that person's going to take my job because they're so good at what they do. So that's jealousy. Jealousy is when you're worried that someone else will take what you have. And then there's envy. And envy is wanting what someone else has. So you have something that I want. And this is a little more simple to understand. It's a 2-part emotion. Person A wants what person B has. An example could be that you wish you had someone else's job. And we can be envious of so many things. And I put the love eyes and the mad eyes emoji there because we kind of love/hate whatever it is. Whether we're envious of that cool person, that's the sunglasses, or as a musician, oftentimes I get envious of the amazing skills that some people have on the guitar, like my friend Jordan over here. And it's not bad. It makes me want to practice more but we become envious of all these things, of people's ability in sports. I'm sure there's many people that are envious of my sports abilities, of cars. boats, trips. We see people going on these trips, people's finances, of people's Apple Watches. I still remember when Sam came in with the Apple Watch, and I was like, I was not envious. I just put that up there. I didn't want it. But I did want it. But I didn't. But I kind of did. But we become envious of the things that people have. And the last one is the little church up there. We can actually become envious of people's spirituality. And when we look at what the Bible has to say, that happens over and over and over again, where people become jealous and envious of another person's spirituality, their take on God. So envy is when we want what someone else has. Despite all these differences, when we're dealing with jealousy, we're dealing with envy, and vice versa. They come hand in hand. I like what Billy Graham, I didn't know of this, but Billy Graham has an advice column online. So that's pretty cool. He's like 90 years old, and he's got an advice column. And just a few days ago, someone asked Billy Graham about jealousy. And Billy said, as Billy often does, jealousy seldom exists by itself. Instead, it brings with it a host of other sins like anger, greed, covetousness, bitterness, and so forth. No wonder the Bible says, anger is cruel and fury overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? When you invite jealousy to the party, he brings his ugly friends and neighbors along. Jealousy never comes alone. Jealousy is destructive. It robs your joy because jealousy doesn't just come on its own. It invites a host of other sins into your life. And you begin this dangerous downward spiral of getting deeper and deeper and deeper into jealousy. Well, we've heard what Homer Simpson has to say about jealousy, but let's look at the Bible, because that is our core foundation. I'm seeing heads like, okay, you're back on track. Way to go. We moved away from Homer. We're getting back to the Bible. Jealousy in the Bible. We have so many stories in the Bible of jealousy and envy. There's Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, Sarah and Hagar, Rachel and Leah, the brothers and Joseph. There's Aaron, who is jealous of Moses. We have the satraps who are jealous of Daniel and how he excelled, and they tricked the king into throwing him into a lion's pit. We've got the Jewish leaders who were jealous and envious of Jesus and the apostles. We have all of these stories. Some of them are family jealousy, where one sibling is jealous of another sibling. Some of them are these spiritual jealousies that I was talking about, where the Jewish leaders didn't know what to do with Jesus, and then later the apostles. And it says they were jealous of them. And so all they could do is condemn them and say they're wrong, don't listen to them. And eventually take Jesus and put him on a cross and try and quiet him that way. But it didn't work. I think one of the most glaring stories of jealousy in the Bible, where it just like shifts from unjealousy to jealousy, is found in 1 Samuel 18, verses 5 through 9. So if you have your Bibles, open up to that chapter. And in this, we find Saul and David. We see Saul and David. King David, King Saul. This was before David was King David. He was just David, the musician. And this is right after David has slayed Goliath. And, he's this conquering hero. And Saul is so thankful. He's so thankful for David being a part of his kingdom. And it says in verse 5, it says, whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. David had become this integral part of the king's family and the military. Right before this, it explains how Jonathan, who is Saul's son, Jonathan and David were best friends. And David is this successful, high-ranking military officer. And David and Saul have this mutual respect. It's a healthy relationship of mutual respect. And I'm sure there was a bit of envy on Saul's part, thinking, man, I wish I would have been the one that threw that rock and killed Goliath. But there was this healthy respect where he promoted him to, this high place in the military. So right now, everything's good it's all good. It's all good. That's what Shane often asks me, he's like, are we good? We all good? And right now, that's where David and Saul are at. They're good. They're good. Verses 6 through 7, things change a little bit. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul. Note that. They came out to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs, with timbrels and lyres. As they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands. So they come out, they come home from this battle, and there's this story that has been spread throughout the land of David defeating Goliath. And it's turned into a song. And the women came out to show honor to Saul, to King Saul, by singing this song. And instead of sharing the spotlight, he became filled with jealousy. The women didn't come out to sing this song to David. It says they came out to sing to Saul. The lyrics were not meant to be taken to heart, and it was just talking about this military victory that had happened. You know, the song became a hit song across the Middle East because later we actually find that when David is before the Philistines a couple times, they're like, wait, is this David? You know, the one, Saul has killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands. Is this David? And it becomes this calling card for who David is and the victory that God's done in his life. It becomes this hit song known throughout the land. Verse 8, it says, as you can imagine with Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They've credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but my kingdom? And from that day on, Saul kept a close, other translations it says, kept a jealous eye on David. Saul became angry and jealous. Saul begins the downward spiral of jealousy. He thinks, David has stolen, my glory. I should have the glory, even though he didn't really do anything. He thinks, he stole my glory. What's next? Is he going to steal my kingdom? And later we find out, yes, Saul, you were pretty right on that. Saul keeps a jealous eye on David from that time on. In that moment, Saul chose jealousy over God's purpose for his life. Because when we choose that path of jealousy, we're choosing a path contrary to what God has for us. Saul could have celebrated in the fact that they had won, that they defeated this Philistine that was challenging them. He could have celebrated in the fact that they had a united kingdom. United kingdom, I just got that. But instead, he allowed the green-eyed monster to take control. What had David done to deserve the anger directed towards him by Saul? What had David done? What had David done? Answer me. What had he done? Nothing. You're so smart and beautiful and wonderful. My wife, everybody. David had done nothing. The people that we are jealous of are not at fault. It's a heart issue between us and God. To illustrate this, I'm going to have my son, Noah, come up here, who's one of the dancers. We have these feelings of jealousy. These feelings of jealousy that just start to fill up. And the more that we add to them, so we have this jealousy that builds, and it builds, and it builds. The more that we add to it, the more likely that it's willing to spill out. It's the more that we add, the more it's going to spill out. And sorry, Lorraine. And not only does these emotions spill out, but a lot of times the people that it spills out on are the people we love most, because it's just churning inside us. Thank you, son. Let's give him a hand.
Can you dump the whole thing on me?
No. We have these negative emotions that are just churning inside of us, and they spill out on the people around us. And this isn't just for jealousy. This goes for anger. This goes for unforgiveness. Because we hurt those we love the most, even if they're not the source of that pain. And I know if you're married, you've had that experience where you've just lost it on your significant other, and they're not the source of why you're so angry, or they're not the source of your jealousy, or they're not the source of your unforgiveness, but it just spills out, and it's going to spill out on those that are closest to you. Jealousy is dangerous. Jealousy steals our joy by taking our eyes off of God and placing it on the people that we are jealous of and on ourselves. Here's some symptoms of a jealous person. A jealous person is distracted from their own true potential. They're so focused on what everybody else is doing, but they are distracted from what they could be doing in their life. They have a distorted perspective of the world. Their outlook of the past and the future just seems empty, because I'll never be as good as this person. They're constantly cutting down others. They're defensive and easily irritated. They're hypersensitive. They interpret the interactions with others in a negative light because they have this negative light that's streaming out of them, that they only can see negativity. They're unsatisfied. They often give backhanded compliments. These are the worst type of compliments. Like, don't give me a compliment if it's backhanded. Tear me down. I'd rather have that. They're untrusting of other people. And ultimately, the outlook of a jealous person says, God owes me. God owes me this thing. There's an author I really respect, and his name is Andy Stanley. And if over this time of looking at these different joy robbers, you're saying, okay, there's a few of these things that are just stuck in my life. This is a great book. It's called Enemies of the Heart. And it's by Andy Stanley. It's called Breaking Free of 4 Emotions That Control You. But I like what Andy has to say about jealousy. He says, there's the book. Hey, it's right up there. When we think about jealousy or envy, we immediately think of the things that others have that we lack. We assume our problem is with the person who possesses what we lack. But let's face it, God could have fixed all of that for us. Whatever he gave your neighbor, he could have given you too. And besides, you don't really want your neighbor's car. You want one like it. You don't mind the fact that God has provided them with one. The problem is that while passing out new cars, God skipped you. And he goes on to say that jealousy, is it going? There it is. Jealousy is really an issue between you and God. What God did for one, he could have done for you too, but for some reason he hasn't. Jealousy is between you and God. What God did for one, he could have done for you, but for some reason he hasn't. It's a mystery. And Saul didn't have a problem with David. He had a problem with God. Ultimately, he had a problem with God. God had placed Saul in the place of leadership over Israel, and David comes along and he shakes some things up. David comes in and shakes things up. Now Saul is questioning the promise of God. He's questioning the promise of God because jealousy clouds our vision. Jealousy had clouded his vision. God had given David, the gifts and abilities that he needed to defeat the giant. He could play a sweet harp song, and eventually he could lead Israel. Air guitar, that's air harp for you all. And God had given him these gifts. And God had given Saul unique gifts as well. God had blessed him with leadership gifts and blessed him with the ability to, lead this kingdom. We don't know what other gifts God had given him, but God had blessed Saul as well. But his vision was so clouded that he didn't recognize his own unique calling. He only had fear. And fear is the opposite of love. Jealousy results in us taking our eyes off of God and placing them on the person we are jealous of. And ultimately, it creates this division between us and God. So the question becomes, how do we eliminate jealousy in our hearts? How do we eliminate jealousy and envy from our hearts? Because we know what those things are. We know that they're dangerous. We know that it creates a problem with our hearts and God. So what do? There's one word. There's one solution for this. And I'll be honest, at first when I heard this, I didn't agree with it, and then it kind of shook me, and then I tried it, and it was really hard. But the one way that we can defeat jealousy is through celebration. Well, there you go. Noah said, what? Celebration. If you truly want to conquer jealousy, then you need to celebrate the success or whatever it is, the success or the size or the stuff of those you are most likely jealous of. Now this means an outward acknowledgement and celebration of those you're most envious of. When you celebrate people, you counteract the negative effects of jealousy. When you outwardly celebrate people, Andy Stanley tells the story of a fellow friend of his that's a preacher named Louis Giglio. If you're familiar with him, he started Passion. And Louis, it became this, they were roommates in college, and they both went in ministry. And he said at one point, Louis had this Passion conference with David Crowder came out of, and all of these amazing things, this huge conference, and Andy Stanley was still playing Chubby Bunny with teenagers. He was like, how come I'm not up here? And he could have taken the path of jealousy. And eventually they both became pretty successful preachers, mega church preachers. And Louis actually opened a church in Andy's backyard. And Andy said, I could have been jealous of him, but I celebrated the fact that that God was blessing my friend and the ministry he's doing. And out of both of them, we have amazing, amazing things that has blessed the church. We celebrate those we're jealous of. Jesus put it best in Matthew when he says, in Matthew 5, I just lost my notes, so I'll read it up there. Matthew 5, he says, you've heard that it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. You could change that and you could say, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate those you're jealous of. But I tell you, love those you're jealous of and pray for those you're envious of. Jesus is calling us to radically deal with those joy robbers in our lives. And for jealousy, that means celebration. That means celebrating those people that we have a hard time with. It's not going to be easy. It's going to feel really fake at first. It's going to feel really fake at first. Like I said, I really enjoyed this book. Andy says, it's much easier to behave your way into a new way of thinking than think your way into a new way of behaving. Don't wait until you feel like celebrating. Celebrate until you feel like it. It's much easier to behave your way into a new way of thinking. It's kind of like exercise. How many of you enjoy exercise? You just love it. Few of you. The majority of you are like me, where it's like afterwards, you're like, okay, that was good. I'm glad that I went for a run. But you do not want to go for a run. Come spring, if you are a runner, come early spring when the snow's still out there, you're like, all right, I'll speak for myself. It's like, I guess I'll go out. And you do your first kilometer and you're like, okay, I'm done. Let's call it a day. But the more that you do it, the more you go out there and run or whatever it is, the easier it gets. At first it's fake. You're forcing yourself to go and do this. But then it becomes what you do. It becomes who you are. Celebrating those we are jealous of will feel fake at first. But it is the clear path. It is the clear path to freedom. We have jealousy, and it's in our hearts, and we all have it in our hearts. And we have this way out. And you can probably think of someone you're jealous or envious of, and I have someone in my head. And when I thought of celebrating their accomplishments, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But it's a powerful and liberating thing to do, because as you do this, as you celebrate, you'll find that the green-eyed monster starts to fade, and it will be replaced with love. It'll be replaced with love. Love will replace that jealousy. God can do that in your hearts. As I close, and as I wrap up here, I want to talk about one more thing about jealousy. And as I was studying this week about jealousy, I came across something that I didn't really want to talk about, because the Bible over and over and over again says that God is a jealous God. And I'm kind of like a peace-loving sort of person. I don't like the thought of God as a jealous God. That's not an image that I want to think about or sing about. And in Exodus, in the 10 Commandments, those core things, it says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. And then this is the troubling part. It says, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. God says that about himself. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. But when we think back to that definition of jealousy, and we put God in place of that, let me look at it here, where it says, it's a three-part emotion. Person A is worried about losing person B because of person or thing C. When we put God in that place of being so concerned about us that he becomes jealous of losing us, it changes that definition, that holy jealousy. You know, God alone is the true living God, the only one worthy of our worship. Can you agree with me on that? I'll do the Shane. Amen? God alone is the true and living God, the only one worthy of our worship. He alone has the exclusive right to the worship and service of his people. He longs for your full attention. Parents, you get this. You long for the full attention of your children. You're like, hey, can you go brush your teeth? What? Can you go brush your teeth? What? God is longing for your full attention. Your exclusive rights to worship belong to him. And jealousy robs us of this intimacy with God that he is jealous for with his people. He wants the exclusive rights to your heart. He loves us so deeply that he doesn't want to share us. He loves us so deeply that he wants us all to himself. When it comes to worship, he doesn't want us to be so filled with these thoughts of like, I gotta be like that person on Instagram or Facebook. He wants us to be focused fully on him. God is jealous for you with a holy jealousy, even if you don't know it. And it's time to surrender to him. It's time to give God everything you have. Let me pray. Father God, we know that you long for our full attention. God, and our attention is so fleeting. Our hearts are so fleeting, God. We get so distracted by jealousy and these things that we want and these people we want to be like, that we lose focus of who you've called us to be. And Father God, I pray that we wouldn't allow jealousy to take over our hearts, God. That we wouldn't be like Saul, where we are unable to celebrate the people around us, even the people we have a hard time with. But God, that we would be people who celebrate others, and we would celebrate you. We would worship you, God, in fullness and in truth and with all that we have.